Hello, glad you can join us. Here's what we have for you this Wednesday. Mass shooting in the U.S. Capitol. Chaos on the streets a day before U.S. Thanksgiving.
It's such a real perilous time. It's hard to understand what the economy will look like next year.
How Ottawa plans to keep key industries above water.
Fundamentally, these are embarrassing numbers.
Plus, the troubling complications seniors may face after major surgery.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
And we begin with breaking news out of Washington, D.C. Gunfire was heard about a block away from the White House. At least 2 members of the National Guard were shot. Let's bring in CTV's Washington Bureau Chief, Joy Malbon. Okay, Joy, controversial move by the U.S. president to bring in the National Guard. So take us through what's happening, what's going on, what do we know?
Well, what we do know is that the FBI is calling this a targeted ambush. They say that this was pre-planned. They believe that the suspect, who was not wearing any ID, planned this and walked right up to the National Guardsmen who are standing around by the subway, by the White House. You see them everywhere. You see them at restaurants, up and down the streets, and then opened fire. We got a little more information about what actually happened and what happened when the suspect was shot as well. And here is an interview clip from the Assistant Metro Police Chief.
At approximately 2:15 this afternoon, members of the D.C. National Guard were on high visibility patrols in the area of 17th and I Street Northwest when a suspect came around the corner, raised his arm with a firearm, and discharged it at the National Guard members. The National Guard members, there were other members that were in the area. They were able to, after some back and forth, able to subdue the individual and bring them into custody. The suspect in this case was also transported for treatment at a local hospital.
Okay, Joy, this is also the day before Thanksgiving. Lots of people probably trying to get home. Is there a sense of panic where you are?
Well, it's very chaotic. I mean, look behind me. I mean, I'm just a couple of blocks from the White House. There are police cars everywhere, yellow tape everywhere. People who have their cars parked can't get to them. I spoke to a couple of people who tried to get past the police tape, and you know, the National Guard here, it's been very controversial for many people. They didn't like them here, and yet we understand that Pete Hegseth is sending another 500 guards for security. Now, just back to those National Guard, there were conflicting stories out there, Sandy. The West Virginia governor said that the 2 guards who were shot were at first in critical condition. Then he said that they had died, and then he backtracked on that. But they are in serious trouble in hospital tonight, fighting for their lives, as is the suspect, who I think I mentioned before was not wearing any ID, and that is why the FBI believes that this was targeted, motivated, and pre-planned. I just want you to take a listen to this interview clip from the Director Kash Patel of the FBI.
Where 2 of our brave members of the National Guard and the Department of War were brazenly attacked in a horrendous act of violence. They were shot. They're in critical condition. As you can see behind me, we have assembled the full force of both the federal and state and local law enforcement agencies to bring bear all of our resources to make sure we find the perpetrators responsible for this heinous act. And make no mistake, they will be brought to justice. Since this is an assault on a federal law enforcement officer, this will be treated at the federal level as an assault on a federal law enforcement officer.
And Sandy, what we do know tonight, that there are no other suspects. The one suspect is in custody and also severely injured. Sandy?
All right, CTV's Joy Malbon in Washington. Joy, thank you. Devastating scenes in Hong Kong today, where the death toll has risen to at least 40 people in a massive fire that engulfed a residential apartment complex. Local media is now reporting that 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. At least 279 people are still missing. 29 are hospitalized. Hours after fire tore through 7 high-rise buildings, crews are still battling the flames that were fueled by bamboo scaffolding. The complex is home to nearly 5,000 residents, and police are investigating whether material on the exterior wall met fire-resistant standards. This heartbreaking image you're looking at captured a distraught man who says his wife is still inside. Here at home, a helping hand for 2 struggling industries hard hit by Donald Trump's punishing tariffs. Canadian steel producers and softwood lumber. The Prime Minister today offered an economic lifeline for steel products, now coping with 50% U.S. import duties. CTV's Judy Trin breaks down the measures introduced to help Canada's steel sector. Okay, Judy.
Sandy, these new measures aim to cut imports of steel while increasing demand for steel produced right here. After enduring half a year of Donald Trump's 50% tariffs, Canada's steel industry is teetering on the edge.
Our order books are not being filled up at this moment because nobody's investing. It's such a real perilous time.
We must protect our workers and our industries who are most exposed to U.S. tariffs.
The Liberal government is introducing new measures to reduce the amount of foreign steel. The countries that Canada does not have a free trade agreement with will face lower quotas. Steel from countries like China, Taiwan, India, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates will now be limited to 20% of what they sold to Canada in 2024. The government estimates that could boost domestic steel sales by $850 million. Other countries with free trade agreements will be capped at 75% of what they sold last year. But U.S. imports won't be capped. But all American steel products will continue to face 25% tariffs.
This government will do whatever it takes to protect our sectors and not just protect them, but to help them reposition for the new global economy.
The government will also subsidize the cost of transporting steel and lumber by rail across the country. Internationally, when it comes to big defense procurements like submarines, Canada will continue making Buy Canadian a requirement.
We will absolutely make sure that there are steel and aluminum and sometimes, depending, lumber requirements, because we need to protect jobs in these tariff sectors.
By January 31st, the government will also end remissions or refunds to Canadian companies impacted by U.S. tariffs. Today, Prime Minister Carney said that he is also going to be headed next week to Washington as part of World Cup events. So, Sandy, maybe he'll bring up tariffs.
Okay, we hope so. Okay, Judy, thank you. Now, aluminum is not part of the help package today, but as we heard in Judy's report, the softwood lumber industry is. Here's what Ottawa is promising to do. There are plans to cut freight costs by 50% for transporting lumber between provinces. Ottawa is prioritizing Canadian lumber in federal housing and defense construction projects and will inject $500 million in loan guarantees for businesses hurt by tariffs. And now that is added to a special fund, which now boosts it to about $1.2 billion. Last month, Donald Trump, you'll recall, increased tariffs to 45% on lumber, which is higher than Russia pays. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson on how that industry is responding to the help being offered by Ottawa.
Sandy, I'm at a softwood lumber manufacturer in Delta, BC, where management say they've just been trying to make it through the year without laying anybody off. They say today's new measures won't make a lot of difference. The softwood industry has been hammered this year by a combination of U.S. duties that have tripled and new tariffs announced by President Trump last month. It has forced producers to raise prices. Business from the U.S. is down. Here at Leslie Forest Products, they say government loans and cheaper rail freight aren't really useful.
We ship very little lumber via rail. You know, most of the wood that we're sending down to the States is going on trucks. So that doesn't really help us. In terms of like loan guarantees, you know, we can already get loans from the bank.
He says what would help is a deal with the U.S. to bring down duties. In the meantime, the company says to remain profitable, it's now forced to send lumber down to the U.S. and refinish it there to avoid some of the tariff and duty hit. And that means less work for employees here.
We're scrambling to find work just to keep our guys going until Christmas.
This family-run business hopes 2026 brings some stability after a year spent hanging on, taking things almost day by day. Sandy.
Okay, Andrew, thank you so much. Now, the Prime Minister is also expected to announce the framework for a new pipeline tomorrow that would run from Alberta to Canada's west coast. But there are still obstacles to overcome and apprehensions to soothe. CTV's Abigail Beeman now on efforts to address the concerns of the BC flank of the party. Abigail.
Sandy, many BC MPs not interested in stopping for the cameras today with a potential new pipeline a live issue in their constituencies. What's your message to BC MPs concerned about the pipeline? No comment from the Prime Minister this morning on potential caucus discord over a pipeline to the BC coast and an agreement with Alberta expected to be announced Thursday.
We enjoy a very open and engaged dialogue.
Very good conversation.
And few words from the Energy Minister, who started his day briefing those BC MPs on what's to come. Were you reassured by Mr. Hodgson this morning?
I was.
Details on both the meeting and what's in tomorrow's announcement scant.
It's premature, irresponsible for anybody to talk about, you know, what people think and who's saying what until there is something that's on paper.
With some MPs, including the caucus chair, insisting everything is fine.
I support the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister has a vision, and something really good will come out of this tomorrow. Everybody's happy, honestly.
But the former Environment Minister wouldn't answer when asked multiple times if he was mulling over quitting. And many BC MPs wouldn't stop to talk. This pair, including Vancouver's former mayor, walked by silently 3 times.
You've got BC bought in, you've got First Nations leadership bought in, and First Nations communities bought in is the minimum expectation.
The memorandum of understanding that we're negotiating with Alberta creates necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions.
That was an oxymoron statement if I ever heard one. I didn't understand what it meant. It's just, I don't think regular Canadians will understand what that means.
In addition to pipeline opposition, which may or may not be bubbling inside caucus, it very much exists from coastal BC First Nations and BC's Premier, who said it's unacceptable his province hasn't been involved in the talks. Sandy?
All right, Abigail, thank you. Another war of words, this time between BC and Saskatchewan, over a lost opportunity. A giant Saskatchewan potash company, Nutrien, has decided to bypass BC and build a $1 billion ocean terminal on the U.S. West Coast.
It is unacceptable. It is deeply disturbing and problematic that Nutrien decided to go to Washington State instead of coming to British Columbia.
That Premier says, we don't want oil in this port, Mr. Speaker, because you can't get a boat into it. And then that same NDP policymaking Premier, Mr. Speaker, questions why another industry isn't making that very investment in our nation.
Nutrien says the proposed facility would create deep water access in the Pacific Northwest, enabling the company to move millions of tons of Canadian potash to global markets. Well, parts of Ontario will soon be dealing with a blast of wintry weather, and it comes as Environment Canada is introducing a rather colorful new system to warn people about extreme conditions. Yellow will indicate hazardous weather, which may cause damage and impact health. Orange signals severe weather, causing significant damage and health impacts, while red warns of very dangerous and possibly life-threatening weather with potential for extreme damage. The new system comes ahead of a winter season expected to be colder than recent years. Coming up after the break.
That is heartbreaking. It's unbecoming for a developed nation like ours.
Why many Canadians are dying while waiting for surgery. Two medical stories for you are in our next segment. First, an alarming stat. Now, more than 23,000 patients have died while on wait lists for surgery in this country in the last year alone. CTV's Heather Wright now on the numbers and one family's heartbreaking personal story. Heather?
Well, Sandy, the group behind this report says the actual number of people dying is likely much higher as many provinces don't track these types of deaths.
Debbie Fuster was expecting a straightforward triple bypass operation, a few days in hospital and then recovery at home. Except the Manitoba woman died before ever getting the surgery.
It still feels like shock.
Daniel Fuster says doctors told his mom she needed heart surgery within 3 weeks. She was left waiting for nearly 3 months.
There was some major mess ups that resulted in her file basically not going to where it needed to go.
Fuster is not alone. According to public policy think tank secondstreet.org, nearly 25,000 patients died in Canada while waiting for surgeries or diagnostic procedures between April 2024 and March 2025. But the organization warns the numbers are likely higher, as many provinces don't track these deaths or only collect partial data.
Fundamentally, these are embarrassing numbers, and I think that's why governments are not keen to go out and track them carefully.
Second Street is calling on all provinces and territories to track and disclose these deaths. They also want to see hospital funding tied directly to performance, a reform they believe will improve wait times.
It's crazy to keep doing the same thing, throwing money at the system and hoping something will change.
Another proposed reform is Debbie's Law, a Manitoba private member's bill championed by the Fuster family, which would require health authorities to inform patients when life-saving treatment cannot be provided in a timely manner.
Debbie's Law is not perfect. It's not going to solve every problem, but it is a great starting point to begin asking for transparency.
This year's numbers mark a 3% increase from last year, and according to Second Street, since 2018, more than 100,000 people have died in Canada while waiting for some sort of surgery or procedure. Sandy.
CTV's Heather Wright. Now, if you are one of the lucky ones to be scheduled for surgery, listen now to the frightening conclusions of a new study that 1 in 6 older adults suffers from new disabilities or even death within 6 months of a major procedure. CTV's Adrian Gobriel takes a deeper dive into the post-op experiences of some Canadian seniors. Adrian?
Sandy, most Canadians go in for a major surgery with the expectation that they'll be better off for it, though a new study led by researchers here at Toronto's St. Michael's Hospital have found that a troubling percentage of patients are ending up with a new disability. The road to recovery for seniors following surgery can be fraught with challenges.
My intestine exploded, and it caused major infections.
Sandra Espinosa is still struggling to find her footing 4 months after a lengthy abdominal surgery.
I even find it difficult to stand up and wash dishes. Something that's so simple, but it's not simple for me anymore.
More than 2,000 Canadian seniors 65 and older were enrolled in a national study by a team of doctors across the country. Their investigation found that 1 in 6 seniors suffer new disabilities or even death within 6 months after going through a major non-cardiac surgery, increasing to 1 in 5 after 1 year.
They had a poor quality of life. They were almost 5 to 6 times more likely to have significant depression.
How concerned should we be?
70% of patients survive surgery and they're functional. That's great. We still have a proportion, that 1 in 6, that struggle. And so we now understand how often that occurs, so we can communicate that to patients. We can have this discussion that we need to have more often before surgery.
Is there more that can be done to better prepare patients ahead of their surgery?
Yes. None of us would choose to run a marathon tomorrow without preparing. But yet we get people to go through very stressful sort of psychological and physical experiences with surgery, oftentimes without much in the way of preparation.
You nearly died post-surgery.
I was very much almost a statistic. Post-surgery is a long battle.
Espinosa hopes that her story and this study begin a vital conversation across the country. Researchers also say that both patients and healthcare providers need to reset their post-surgery expectations. The study found that it's taking the average Canadian senior 3 to 6 months to regain their full physical capacity. Sandy.
Okay, Adrian, thank you. When we return, another CTV W5 investigation. All right, so an effort by a Canadian company to provide a new drug to treat multiple sclerosis was nearly derailed by a massive stock slide. And now the company is making allegations of wrongdoing in court for losses it estimates are in the hundreds of millions. W5's John Woodward is with us now to tell us more about this lawsuit. What's going on?
Well, Sandy, it's a $700 million lawsuit filed in an American court where the company Quantum Biopharma makes allegations it was the victim of a market manipulation tactic called stock spoofing. And if you haven't heard of that, that's where a trader makes a big buy or sell order, but they never actually intend to complete it. It's just a ruse, a trick to get other investors to buy into the idea that a stock might go higher or lower. And here, Quantum says they got millions of orders in Canada, the United States. All of that pushed their stock price down. The company says they believe that those orders were executed through major Canadian banks. And here's what the CEO had to say.
It is the banks and the brokers that have the responsibility to act as gatekeepers, to ensure that their clients and their traders are not breaching rules and regulations by the way they're trading.
And it sounds like you don't think they did their due diligence.
We do not believe they did.
So, John, what's been the response by Canadian banks to this?
Well, the defendants, CIBC and RBC, say they deny being a part of this. They actually say that Quantum was itself responsible for its own losses, blaming what they call mismanagement. There was a large dumping of Quantum stock at one point. And they also say that Quantum has failed to turn a profit. So it's going to be up to a U.S. court to take a look at this.
Interesting story. John, thank you. And coming up after the break, the Canadian astronaut whose out-of-this-world career is set to skyrocket. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen is on his final visit home ahead of a mission that will see him fly around the moon next year. And today he stopped by CTV News studios telling us he's ready for what lies ahead.
It's mixed feelings. It's starting to get real. You know, some of our training, we're doing it for the last time, and that's starting to give me this different sense. I'm getting excited. Sometimes I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And then other moments I'm like, okay, we've still got a lot to do.
Hansen is one of 4 astronauts who are part of Artemis 2, which is the first crewed mission in NASA's project to establish a long-term presence on the moon.
We will see parts of the moon that have never been seen by human eyes. And we might not pick up anything that's new, but we might. And we have great instrumentation out there that's mapping the moon. We have all this great imagery, but the human eye is very adept at picking out different shades, different frequencies.
Hansen will be the first non-American to travel beyond lower Earth orbit, and he says the mission shows the importance NASA places on working with Canada.
We come with our amazing technology. We're building a 3rd generation of space robotics for the Lunar Gateway, for example. We're working on lunar rovers and logistics systems for the surface of the moon. These are ways that we will help in the future. We are better together.
What an amazing man. Good luck, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. Bye for now. We'll see you tomorrow. Be well.